Julian has prepared quite a bit for us. Are you ready, Julian?
I'm ready to go.
All right, over to you.
Right. All right. Thanks, Yanis, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I've got a few slides on the topic of how to make meetings more productive, and my goal is going to be finished by about 20 minutes after the hour, so that we have time for other people to share some ideas or ask some questions about meetings, because it's something that everybody has experienced, as Yanis was establishing as we get going. One thing I will just, because I'm not that accustomed to presenting through Google Meet, so I'm not actually going to see the whole group. So yes, if people are asking questions or whatever, you can tell me to up if somebody has their hand up. So yeah, so nice to meet everybody. For quick background, I've worked mostly in the corporate world for a number of years. I was director of marketing for AGFA, the Belgian-based imaging system manufacturer. I also worked at a large Canadian bank, and I was at one of the big Canadian pension funds. So for you, if you know the corporate world, they breed meetings like crazy. So I had to get very good at meetings, and had relatively large teams. So I used to coach my teams on how to handle meetings. And when Yanis and I were talking about this, we're joking a bit that it's meetings are like a serve if you're a tennis player. Like if every time you don't step on the court, you're going to. So it's something to practice. Just for some quick context, I'm going to be joining Yanis at the CMS conference in France in May, and going to be doing a presentation about sort of leadership methodology for leading transformations. So just to put the meetings in context of that is, one of the challenges of transformation, I think most of you on the call are directly involved with managing it. I think what you know is that you have to bring together multiple disciplines. And that's one of the challenges of transformation, is you just have to be good at a lot of different things. And something I'm a big believer in is when you have to have subject matter expertise, it brings up the trade craft. And so it's just something that you have to keep getting good at. So some of you may recognize the gentleman in the picture. It's Lee Von Helm, the drummer from the band, which is one of my favorite bands. And in one of the documentaries about them I was watching, he was watching Garth Hudson, who was his bandmate and an incredibly talented musician. And he just said, it's easy when you know how. And I've always liked that example of, pick something and look easy. And definitely meetings are something that we want to keep getting good at. And then in relation to transformation, this is really where the trade craft challenge comes in, because transformation means managing complexity and ambiguity. And for a lot of our colleagues who are not managing transformation, it's bit managing clarity. How do you have kind of a certain outcome that you're trying to drive to? I know I'm painting with a broad brush here, but we actually have to step into the complexity and ambiguity. And the big issue is we have to know more than one technique, and we have to be able to work with very disparate teams when we're in transformation. So that's where the trade craft gets a little more challenging, and that's what I'll be talking about in Frankfurt. And then definitely one of the big trade craft elements that we have to look at is meetings. So for full disclosure, this slide I did not write. I went into ChatGPT and I asked, why are meetings unavoidable? What AI said. So, one of the downside of AI is it's kind of predictable and anodyne, but at the same time, when you want a kind of a universal answer, it really does summarize what people think about meetings. And so, love them or hate them, meetings are an inevitable part of our life. I'm not going to read every one on the slide here, but I'll maybe pull out 3 key points. So one, meetings help us do very big things at work. Collaboration, problem solving, relationship are all really critical to being successful in the workplace. And so meetings are really critical there. The other thing I'll note though is things can be done without a meeting. So you can collaborate without a meeting, you can get accountability without a meeting, you can build relationships without a meeting. So I think that's the other big point I would make, is being very intentional about why you're having a meeting. So yes, you can solve big problems, but they are a means to an end. They're not an end unto themselves. So don't do a meeting. And then the final point I would make is, if you look at this, each one of these are very different. And so one of the things I'll be talking to in the short case study I share is, in my experience, when sort of meetings are unproductive, it's when the person holding the meeting isn't intentional about what type of meeting they're having. Then they try to maybe have 3 meetings in one meeting, and then all of a sudden it's not getting where it needs to be. So yes, we may come back to this slide if this is sort of thoughts for some folks, but if I keep sort of plowing along, I know Yanis loves this idea of having a meeting about meetings, and we may even have a conversation about that. When we talk about, what makes a successful meeting, it's pretty clear cut. Is when everybody shows up at the meeting, they know the purpose of the meeting, they know the advanced preparation they're supposed to undertaken, they understand the outcomes, and they understand how they're going to contribute. So pretty easy to sort of say that's a successful meeting. Challenge is, and there's a few reasons. So one is just sometimes people don't follow basic meeting hygiene. So they don't explain the purpose. They don't tell people what they have to do to prepare. Usually that's not the case. The bigger issue is that meetings are integrated to an overall system for doing strategy, planning, organizing, delivery. And the other thing is they have to work in conjunction with other meetings and organizing systems. And again, experience, that's sometimes when the meetings, if the person running the meeting doesn't see the whole chessboard, that's sometimes where you run into an issue. Like a very simple example is somebody might be being tasked with project managing a project, but the project was approved in a different meeting. Some commitments were made to allocate the budget for that, and the PM doesn't really know what commitments were made. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but I'm exaggerating. And then all of a sudden, they think, okay, those are really clear, but they don't know what was talked about. They also don't understand what feedback mechanism there is to go back to that the organization that funded to say what happened. And then sometimes that's where things can come off the rails a bit. And then another big issue is they really do vary based on organizational type and culture. So again, sort of stark examples is one, there could be a weekly sales meeting for an enterprise sales organization where everybody comes in to update their performance against the target, and everybody's using the same sales process. So I can say I'm at 90% of plan, but if you look at my funnel, you can see I'm actually ahead of plan there. So I'm expecting to be back on track by next week. Or you could go to a government bureaucracy. There's a meeting to align on a very complex policy issue that affects multiple ministries. There's a lot of stakeholders that are also affected, and it's being tracked by by the media. So obviously those 2 meetings are going to be very different. It's not to say one's good and one's bad. What is bad though is if, say, the sales executive comes to the bureaucratic meeting and tries to run a sales meeting, it's not going to go very well. So that's where that intentionality comes in. So what I'll mention now is this case study of one of the things I'm a big believer in is removing meetings from a vacuum. So it goes back to what's the chessboard. If I'm having a meeting, do what that meeting is for. And so in this instance, we're going to look at a set of meetings that took place in an overall planning, problem solving, standard setting, and delivery system that a number of meetings were functioning within. So when I was at BMO, which is one of the Canadian banks, it was a top 5 bank. I had about a 20-person team, and we managed 5 portals and about 8 internet sites. And there was 45,000 employees at the bank. So we worked with about 1,000 stakeholders to do 5,000 intake requests a year. Also ran hundreds of projects to stand up new intranet pages. So we had a very clear strategy. We did 4 things. We sustained, maintained, innovated, and transformed the digital workplace. And within that, we had a very clear strategic architecture. So we had an established platform, which was based on SharePoint. And then our run rate, which is the blue, that was the maintain and innovate, we controlled through a set of standards. So we're really clear about how we could commit to things, push work out the door without finding the platform. And then we wanted the transformation function to sit outside of the run rate. So that was where the business requirements were focused. So as I said, nice crisp strategy, everybody understood it, and we were completely to achieve strategic objectives. And when I looked at that, we had a meeting problem. And so what I was talking about there is we would have a weekly update meeting where the core team would get together. We would look at what's on our dock for the week. And then what would happen very frequently is one of our account management team would come in that would have had a stakeholder requirement meeting the previous week. They'd hear that the executive vice president wants this finished within a week, and the EVP is more powerful than your boss, so you have to do what I say. And now it was a very nice place to work. kind of difficult. I'm saying that for dramatic effect. So what would happen is our weekly update meeting was supposed to be 20 minutes long, and then we would get back to building solutions. But what would happen is we're like, oh my goodness, we better all stop what we're doing and get focused on this. So suddenly our 20-minute update meeting had become a 3-hour meeting, because we'd start to say, well, what should we do here? What solution can we use? And then we're like, oh, well, what standard is going to guide that? And we'd realize we hadn't actually got around to doing the standard because we hadn't had time. And just default to just this once, we'll do what they ask for. And, obviously that was happening twice a week. And as a result, we were so busy that we weren't systematically approaching this. So as I say, it wasn't catastrophic, but we certainly weren't achieving the strategy to the extent we wanted to. And kind of what I identified is that we had a meeting problem. So in order to execute the strategy, we started to very specifically work on our meetings. And so what I'll mention here is there was part of my background is I've worked in marketing, I've worked in sales, I've worked in management. So, even I'm Agile certified. So I've had a lot of different exposure to meeting types, and that's what I really focused on. So one of the upfront pieces we worked on, the idea of guided requirements, and this quite frankly was a sales meeting. Even though we weren't selling anything, we treated it like a sales meeting. In that, you in sales, that you go meet with a prospective client, you've got a solution, either a professional service or a product that you think could solve that prospective person's problem, but you need to confirm that first. So you need to earn their trust. So the first thing that I said to the team is that every meeting has to start with yes, we can, because the team had a tendency to be very aware of the limitations of the system. So they would often say, we're not sure we can do that. I don't know if we can do that exactly the way you've described it. And that was an instant failure, because the person would hear the internet team can't deliver. Worst case scenario, they would sometimes go hire an agency that they thought could do the work, and that only compounded the problem. So that step one is start with yes, we can, and then say, let's understand what you need to do and get into it. I'll date myself on the next one, is that standards are like Fight Club, right? So in Fight Club, nobody talks about club. What they could not do in that meeting was mention standards, because as soon as you tell an internal stakeholder that you've got a standard, they don't want to follow it because they think they're not being allowed to be innovative. I just didn't bring it up. And then the last point was that they couldn't make commitments in the room, because I didn't want them being held hostage for dates or specific solutions. So they'd say, it's very exciting. Let me get back to our team and we'll come back to you with what we can do. So the next meeting that was for team visibility was the weekly meeting. The key thing here was just discipline and purpose, because what ends up happening if you have a relatively large team and people aren't in meetings, then they get anxious because they think, is something going on that affects me that I don't know about? We have a very comprehensive project dashboard so people could see what was up to date, etc. But I wanted to signal the intent is that we do want people to know what's going on. But the big issue was a big productivity driver. If everybody went to the same meeting, we just chewed up a lot of time. So we wanted the fewest number of people in meetings possible, but that meant that they had to know that they were having information shared with them. And then the other thing is internal discipline, is that this was updates only. If a solution came up and somebody wanted to ask a question about it, everybody had permission to shut them down and say, look, this is just for updates. There's other meetings where you can learn more. The next thing, and this was really key, was building repeatable solutions, because this is where the team's productivity came from, is build once, deploy many. And so this, quite frankly, was based on it. We didn't use an agile methodology, but the thought process was agile. For starters, the meeting was every week. So, because sometimes people would say, well, we don't have time to wait for a solutions meeting. But I'm like, it's every Wednesday afternoon. If it's a priority, bring it in there, because sufficient cadence for that. The other key issue is it was the core team only. So it was just my direct reports. We didn't bring other team people in because again, it was a productivity drain if we had too many people in the meeting. But the other key thing is I wasn't there, because if I was there, I mean, quite frankly, they knew more about the solutions than I did. The other thing is that they would kind of ask for my opinion and stuff. So it just slowed them down. And I wanted them to establish a flow where they would get in and just get into a nice flow state around the meeting. So to empower them, like if they gained consensus that it worked, it was really important that they got into that. And then we just had a very lightweight scoring, like you would do in Agile, where it was like, if we're asked to do a page type, how many people in the bank are going to see it? and how often will we rebuild it? So it was obviously high repeatability. That was one that we would get very interested in. And then the thing was standards, because the standards help you be more efficient in the solutions meeting. So once the standards were, once they agreed that the standard should work, they would come meet with me again every month, and it was a regularly scheduled meeting. And my template there was a standard management approval meeting approach, where they understood parameters for a yes or a no, and they would make sure that they could present it to me that way. And then once the approval was provided, then it would get documented. And then the really is that would present it to the full team every month. And then also there was training at our lunch and learn. So if again, all of these things were booked so that we had a system to drop, the right problem into the right bucket. And finally, it was very important to establish context for the team. It's really important for people to know what they're doing, why they're doing it, how their contribution matters, also establishing team culture. So we would have a full team meeting every month. One of the first things we did is at the meeting always started with an end user. So we wanted the context of who are we doing this work for. We might have an executive vice president to come in to talk about a big initiative so that they understood how we were supporting it. And then the next month, we might have 2 representatives from our call center who are directly in with the solutions we build. And then it was also very important that everybody understood how we were progressing on our objectives. So we would talk ours, under sustain, maintain, innovate, and transform. We had early objectives, and we would present on that. And then the final thing is that the rule was that there could never be an individual presenting, because the team had to function as a team. And so it was, if the account team and the build team were presenting, I always wanted to make sure that they presented together. So that kind of gives you the case study. And then Yanis, I sort of flip over and start getting some questions on this.
Sure.
These are just sort of some tips and tricks that I've picked up. A couple that I'll just mention briefly. I won't read each one. I mean, obviously the purpose, outcome, and a time-boxed agenda, that's just good meeting hygiene. But one of the things I find is I force myself to do that, and I'll sometimes say, hey, we got a 30 meeting coming up. I'll say the purpose is X, the outcome is Y, and then I'll start to say, okay, for 15 minutes we'll do this and that, and I'll realize we're actually got a 90-minute meeting. So it just forces the meeting organizer to be really clear. Jumping down, the minimum and maximum goal. I had a fantastic mentor who'd been a high-performing sales manager for years, and we would go to meetings together, and he'd say, "What's your minimum goal and what's your maximum goal?" And I've really picked that up with my team, and so that we'll often go into meetings where there's going to be some ambiguity, and I'll be really clear, like, it's your meeting, but what are we trying to get out of it, and what's the minimum, what's the maximum? It's just to help of getting a group of people organized. And then the last one is FOMO, is the fear of missing out. It's amazing how many people want to come to meetings that they don't need to be in, scared that they're not there, they're going to miss out on something, and that in and of itself can make the meeting a little less productive. So, Yanis, that was my
All right.
kind of all the slides there. Then
Thank you, Julian. Right on the nose.
Turn things over to others.
20 minutes about meetings, transforming meetings, not just meetings. Let's just open the floor, as they say, to questions, comments, reflections. I'm pretty sure for those joining from Europe and the UK, this is not the first meeting of today. For others in the North America, it may be your first meeting of the day, like Sean. But do jump in. I'm curious to hear if any of you have like meeting rules in your organizations. Like I've gone to many meetings and also visited many different organizations. And in some organizations, I think in Denmark, Lego, but also others come to mind. In every meeting room, there's like a poster or a small thing on the table that says, there are 11 things about good meetings. Does anybody here have something like that? Something articulated about how you do meetings in your organization? Perhaps that's not the case.
Go ahead.
All right, Guy, why don't you go? Yes.
Turn on my microphone. Hi, Julian. Thanks and James and I are in the same room, so thanks for turning off your microphone, James. If we're doing Agile, Scrum, there's always the same agenda again and again for each ritual, so everybody knows what's going on and why we're having the meeting. Sometimes there's not a consensus outside of that meeting, those meetings. One is this a working meeting or is it a planning meeting? Should we have an agile? Sorry, should we have an agenda? Therefore, a structured process, but maybe not open to being creative and innovative, as you said. So yeah, if we're working within agile, yes. If we're not, no. There's not like a consensus. Always have to have an agenda.
No, but that's, I mean, I think what's key there is that you do have the ability to agree up front about what type of meeting it is. I think that is very that's very beneficial, because it's inefficient if there's three people having three different meetings, same meeting, because that's when you can often work across purposes.
All right, good. Thank you. We made it work, even being in the same room. Anybody else wants to talk? Transforming meetings, share meeting pains. Paul, Abdul, I see you're unmuted. You want to say something? You can go.
Only thing I was going to say is that one of the things that I've seen lately is the entrepreneurial operating system, which has a very detailed meeting protocol, if you will. And I thought that was a very good one to really keep an eye on the big picture as well as the weekly goals between meetings.
Excellent. I'll make sure to link to that. And instead of you commenting, Julian, why don't we take 2 or 3 others, and then I'll trust your skills to wrap it up. Thank you, Paul. Then we'll go to Oslo. Matthias?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the FOMO here, and I've been to a lot of meetings where I maybe wouldn't have been if it wasn't for some kind of meeting FOMO, and I think that's really an important point here, that if you have a meeting, if you plan that meeting well and can tell people that, you know, we're not going to make decisions that are going to affect you, you know, it's very clear that these are the topics for the meeting. You both make the meeting happen in a more organized fashion, but you also make, well, you take away that element of FOMO.
Very good. Then we'll go to the UK. Greg?
Can you hear me?
Yep, let's go.
Yeah, just expanding on what Paul said. Yeah, we run level 10s. It's called a level 10. The meetings in the EOS framework, they follow a very good structure. Make sure that everybody's focused on it. It's very time box sensitive. Keeps everybody on track, and then you rate the meeting at the end, so it becomes a really kind of productive decision. So absolutely, I mean, we use a slightly varied version of it, but it's very structured still in the same way. So our meetings are all like that. So couldn't agree more with that kind of structure. So definitely share that with people.
So Julian, just to elaborate on the L10, you want to score a 10 in your meeting. That is the goal.
You want your meetings to be a 10, yes, but things can kind of, you go off track and all the other things, but you have time to have a segue, so you kind of introduce yourself into the meeting, then you go through kind of your scorecard and various other things, then you get things and you add them to an IDS, it's called, so it's like an issue. You raise the issues, you discuss them, and you solve them, and it's time boxed. You do them in priority order and everything, so it works really, really efficiently.
All right, look what just happened. That's great. Thanks for sharing, both of you. Then let's go to New Jersey, I believe. Brian?
Yeah, Julian, thanks for the content, and wanted to get your take on this idea, but also share it with the rest of the group. Something that has worked well for me in the past with the team is I schedule, or we kind of have a mandate for a no meeting day. So one day of the week where there are no meetings, you could have a conversation, right? Which is 1 or 2 other people about a topic, but no official standing meetings or anything of that nature. And that worked well. I'm just curious to get your take on that.
That's really interesting, because I work places where we've tried that. I think my quick thought now is especially because the hybrid work, it's really not everybody has the same work week. So I think that would be a quick thought there. And then, I mean, maybe to be a bit of a, you know, provocateur, but it's you have to, like, why don't you make your meetings better rather than avoiding meetings? Like that's kind of a jerk thing to say. But it's maybe I don't mean to be a jerk, but it's, so that's kind of why it's like, if it's something that you are trying to avoid, maybe that's something you need to improve. But having said that, it's I do think there's some value to saying that no, meetings don't fix every problem, and we don't have to have meetings every day. But it's kind of, it's thought provoking. I hadn't thought about that one in a while.
Yeah, and it's I totally agree with you on making the meetings better, right? Don't just avoid them entirely. The primary driver for us when we did it was the ability to spend a day, you know, kind of working on projects, getting work done, where with meetings spread throughout your day, it felt like you couldn't actually focus long enough. So
yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say is I'm a huge fan. I know Paul's an elite athlete, so this will resonate with Paul, but it's big to get into a state, right? You know, like if you can allow people to work for concentrated 90 minutes or have days when they can get into a flow state, like I think that's very beneficial. And increasingly we have to be, it requires creativity and imagination. And, you know, so having a day when you can get into a flow state where you're not in and out of meetings, which cuts down on it, I think that's beneficial.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Very good. We're coming up at the end, so I will just find time to go to Hamburg. Thomas.
Yeah, just a little quick hello from Hamburg. We're working right now on something I call preconditions for successful meetings, I would say, because we've been looking into some of the comments of people leaving us. And there are always comments on, I never get to work, I'm always stuck in meetings all day. So there's some strange misconception between being in a meeting and actually working. And I think there are several things on the list here that you have that we also come up with. And I think one thing is important, it's you can make it possible for people to say no. I'm not coming to this meeting because I think I didn't understand why I'm invited. I'm not able to prepare myself. I don't think I can contribute in any way. So turn around a bit and say no if you don't understand. And maybe that provokes people to explain a little bit better why they thought it was a good idea to invite you in the first place, or why you didn't have the information. Sorry, here it is. As something you have to get approach as an organization, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Thomas. Last words, Julian. Would you like an attempt at the beautiful wrap up?
Yeah, one thing I'll mention is what I didn't talk about was AI. I mentioned this to Yanis as we're getting ready. So I'm doing a course through MIT right now on applying AI to business strategy, and AI is a big game changer in meetings. I should have mentioned that, right? So we can use Copilot, we can use Otter to take notes, and yeah, there's even organizations now that are, you know, creating personas at work and tasks to be done to eliminate meetings, like using AI to basically map stuff out for folks. So what I would say is this, I'm painting with a broad brush, is AI I think is going to transform everything, including meetings. But one of the key things is, you know, for the folks that have mentioned your meeting systems, AI is going to be way better there, right? Because AI likes process and predictable data. So if your meetings are random, you're not actually going to get the full benefit of AI. So that's just another reason, I think, to put more, like AI is another reason to put more structure against your meetings. So yeah, so I've really appreciated the ideas. I've made quite a few notes here, so I'm looking forward to following up on some.
All right, we'll collaborate on doing the blog post together, Julian. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
perfect.
all of you. Thanks for finding the time on a Monday.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it. Have a great week ahead, and thank you, Julian, once again for sharing with us and preparing this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you. All right, bye now.